Engines don't just die on their own, they're murdered. And one of the silent killers hiding under almost every hood is the PCV valve, or positive crankcase ventilation valve. It looks harmless, it costs less than a fast food meal, but when it goes bad, it can slowly destroy your engine from the inside out. Here's what it actually does. As your engine runs, dirty gases build up in the crankcase. The PCV valve's job is to vent those gases out and send them back into the intake so they can be burned off safely. It keeps internal pressure under control, keeps your oil cleaner, and stops sludge from forming. Simple, right? But here's the nightmare part. When that little valve clogs or sticks shut, pressure inside your engine has nowhere to go. That pressure forces oil past gaskets and seals, pushes oil straight into your intake, and starts filling everything with sludge and carbon deposits. I've torn down engines where the inside of the valve cover was literally coated in baked-on black crud, all because nobody bothered to replace a $7 PCV valve. The symptoms creep up slowly. Oil leaks that seem to come out of nowhere, smoke out of the tailpipe, a rough idle dropping fuel economy, or an engine that just feels tired and weak. Most drivers never check it. Some don't even know it exists, and that's why it quietly ruins engines while everyone is busy blaming something else. The fix? It's almost laughably simple. Every few oil changes, just pull the valve out and shake it. If it rattles, it's working. If it doesn't, or it looks clogged, toss it and replace it. The job takes 5 minutes, costs next to nothing, and can literally save your engine's life. Ignore it, and your engine will slowly choke itself to death, turning a $7 part into a $7,000 mistake. The thermostat might look like a simple little chunk of metal, but don't let its size fool you. This part has the power to destroy your entire engine in minutes. Its job is straightforward. It controls the flow of coolant. When your engine is cold, it stays closed so the engine can warm up faster. Once the engine hits the right operating temperature, it opens and lets coolant flow through to the radiator, keeping everything balanced and cool. But here's where things turn deadly. When a thermostat sticks shut, your coolant never gets to circulate. That means heat builds up fast, and your engine starts cooking itself from the inside. I've seen it happen countless times. A perfectly good engine ruined in less than 15 minutes because of a thermostat that costs less than $20. Heads warp, gaskets blow, and aluminum blocks crack under the pressure. I once had a customer bring in a Civic that kept overheating in traffic. He thought it was the radiator, maybe a water pump. Nope, it was the thermostat stuck shut. By the time he figured it out, it was too late. The head was warped, the gasket was toast, and the car that was supposed to be reliable turned into a money pit. The warning signs are there, but most people ignore them until it's too late. The temperature gauge spiking, no heat coming from your vents, or the engine taking way too long, or not long enough, to warm up. These are all red flags. Here's the smart move. Anytime you change your coolant, which should be about every 5 to 7 years, replace the thermostat too. Don't gamble on bargain bin junk. Stick with OEM or quality aftermarket parts. A $15 thermostat and 20 minutes of your time can save you from a $2,000 repair bill. Ignore it, and you might as well start budgeting for a new engine. Everyone knows you should change your oil regularly. But here's the real question. What kind of oil filter are you trusting your engine's life with? Because not all filters are created equal, and a cheap one can quietly murder your engine without you even realizing it. An oil filter's job sounds simple. It catches dirt, metal shavings, and contaminants before they can circulate through your engine. But it's more than just a paper screen. A good filter has to hold pressure, regulate oil flow, and survive brutal heat cycles. A bad one? It might collapse inside, clog up, or even bypass completely, letting dirty oil circulate freely through your engine at high speed. I've cut open enough bargain bin filters to know the truth. Thin paper, weak valves, flimsy construction. Sometimes they don't filter at all. Sometimes they block oil entirely. Either way, the damage is brutal. I had a customer with a Ford 5.4 Triton come in complaining about ticking at the top end. Oil pressure looked fine. Oil itself looked clean. But when I pulled the filter, it was clogged solid. The internals had collapsed and oil wasn't reaching the cams. That motor was starved for months, and by the time he knew, it was too late. The engine didn't survive. The worst part? Most drivers think a filter is a filter. They grab the cheapest white box brand on the shelf, spin it on, and forget about it. But that little decision could mean the difference between smooth running and total engine failure. Here's the rule: never cheap out on filters. Stick with trusted brands, Wix, Mobil One, OEM, or other reputable names. Stay away from the mystery filters sold in bulk or the no-name junk you see online. And when installing one, don't over-tighten, always oil the gasket before you spin it on, and if your car uses a cartridge-style filter, double-check the O-rings. I've seen more engines leak out all their oil from a $2 O-ring mistake than I can count. Think about it. You wouldn't run dirty oil in your car. So why would you run a dirty, or worse, useless filter? For a part that costs less than a tank of gas, it's the cheapest insurance you can buy for your engine. Ignore it, and your clean oil could actually be circulating grit and sludge, grinding your motor into an early grave. When people think about timing belts, they usually worry about the belt itself snapping. And while that's bad, here's the truth most drivers don't realize. It's often not the belt that fails first. It's the tensioner or the idler pulley guiding it. And when one of those goes, your engine can be destroyed in seconds. Here's how it works. The timing belt keeps your camshaft and crankshaft perfectly in sync. If that timing slips even a little, pistons and valves stop playing nice and start colliding. That's catastrophic in an interference engine, which most modern engines are. Valves bend like twigs, pistons get scarred, and your motor is suddenly nothing but an expensive paperweight. Now, the belt itself can look fine, but if the tensioner loses spring tension, if the pulley bearings seize, or if one wobbles out of alignment, the belt instantly loses control. And when that happens at highway speeds, game over. I've seen heads pulled off with half the valves bent, all because a $30 pulley gave out. One case sticks with me. A customer with a Mitsubishi 2.4 liter. The timing belt was brand new, looked perfect, but he decided to save a few bucks and reuse the old tensioner. 2 months later, cruising at 65 miles per hour, the tensioner failed. The valves smashed into the pistons, and that engine never ran again. All because he tried to save a few dollars on the job. That's why when you do a timing belt replacement, you never just do the belt. You always replace the entire kit. Belt, tensioner, pulleys, and even the water pump if it's driven off that same system. And don't just slap it together. Torque everything to spec, especially the tensioner bolts. I've seen them back out when people cut corners, and the results are just as deadly as a broken belt. This is one of those jobs where going cheap is guaranteed to cost you big. Think about it. One bad bearing, one weak spring, and your engine is done in less time than it takes to blink. Don't gamble your entire motor on the weakest link in the system. Spend the extra, replace it all, and you'll have peace of mind for years. Ignore it, and you might as well start shopping for a replacement engine. When people think about cooling system failures, they imagine blown hoses, cracked radiators, or bad thermostats. But the truth is, one of the most dangerous parts in your cooling system is also the smallest and cheapest, the radiator cap. Most drivers never give it a second thought, but this little piece of metal and rubber has the power to quietly destroy your engine. Here's what it actually does. The radiator cap doesn't just seal the system, it controls pressure. That pressure is critical because it raises the boiling point of your coolant. Without enough pressure, coolant boils sooner, turns into vapor, and your engine starts overheating fast. And the scary part? A weak radiator cap can fail silently, with no puddles under your car, no obvious leaks, just slowly disappearing coolant and creeping heat. I've seen it firsthand. A Chevy Tahoe came into my shop that kept overheating on long drives. The owner had already replaced the thermostat, the water pump, and even the radiator, spending hundreds of dollars. But the problem? The radiator cap couldn't hold pressure. It failed a simple test at 10 psi. That was it. The whole system was breaking down because of a part smaller than your fist. When a radiator cap goes bad, the signs are subtle. Your coolant reservoir keeps running low. You notice temperature spikes, or your car overheats only after long trips. Ignore those warnings, and the damage escalates quickly. Overheating warps aluminum heads, blows head gaskets, and can even crack plastic radiator tanks. The fix couldn't be simpler. Swap the cap. It takes 30 seconds, costs less than $15, and can save you from thousands in repairs. But here's the catch. Don't just grab any cap off the shelf. The pressure rating has to match your system. Too low, and you'll overheat. Too high, and you risk bursting hoses or radiators. Most people replace hoses, radiators, thermostats, even water pumps before they ever suspect the cap. Don't be one of them. Change it every few years, especially if you notice coolant loss or temp spikes. A $10 radiator cap is one of the cheapest insurance policies you'll ever buy for your engine. Ignore it, and you could end up cooking your motor alive, without even realizing what went wrong. Your engine needs 3 things to run: air, fuel, and spark, and the ignition coil is the part responsible for delivering that spark. Its job is to take the 12 volts from your battery and amplify it into thousands of volts, enough to jump across the spark plug gap and ignite the fuel mixture. Without it, there's no combustion. Without combustion, there's no power. Sounds simple, right? But here's the dark side. When an ignition coil starts to fail, it doesn't just rob you of performance, it can destroy your engine and exhaust system in ways most drivers never see coming. When a coil goes bad, the spark weakens or disappears altogether. That cylinder starts to misfire. Your engine begins shaking at idle, stumbling under acceleration, and throwing a check engine light. But here's where it gets nasty. Every time the spark doesn't fire, raw, unburned fuel gets dumped straight into your exhaust. That fuel doesn't just vanish. It ignites inside your catalytic converter, which is designed to clean emissions, not burn raw gas. The result? Extreme heat that melts the catalyst brick inside, clogging your exhaust and choking your engine. I'll never forget one Dodge Caravan that came into the shop. The owner thought he had a broken motor mount because the engine was shaking so violently. Nope, it was a dead ignition coil. He ignored it for weeks. By the time it got to me, the raw fuel had melted the catalytic converter and fouled 3 spark plugs. A $40 coil turned into a $900 repair bill. Here's the problem. Cheap coils don't last. Heat kills them over time, especially on V6 engines where the rear bank bakes under the intake. And when one fails, others often follow. That's why I always recommend OEM or high-quality aftermarket coils, not bargain bin no-names. And if you're replacing a coil, inspect the spark plugs and boots while you're in there. A worn plug can overload a brand new coil, taking it down prematurely. The symptoms are obvious if you know what to look for: rough idle, hesitation under load, poor fuel economy, or that flashing check engine light. Ignore those warnings, and you're not just running with less power. You're slowly cooking your catalytic converter, wrecking your plugs, and risking engine damage. The fix? Simple. Replace the coil, replace bad plugs, and don't cheap out on the parts. Your ignition system is the heart of combustion, and without reliable spark, your engine is fighting for its life. Pay attention to misfires, because one bad coil can snowball into thousands of dollars in repairs if you let it go. If there's one dashboard light you never want to see, it's the oil pressure warning. That light means your engine is seconds away from seizing. But here's the cruel twist. The part that controls that light, the oil pressure sensor, is a $20 switch that can lie to you. And when it does, you either panic for no reason, or worse, you think everything's fine while your engine is quietly destroying itself. Here's what the sensor actually does. It threads into your block and monitors oil pressure. Then it sends that signal to your dash, giving you either a reading or a simple light. But when the sensor fails, two things can happen, neither of them good. Scenario 1, the sensor gets weak and starts throwing false warnings. Your oil light flickers at idle, then goes away while driving. You think your pump is failing, you stress, you spend money chasing a ghost problem. I once had a customer with a Silverado 5.3 who replaced the pump, only to learn later it was just the sensor lying. Scenario 2, the deadly one. The sensor fails in the opposite way. It gets stuck showing normal, even when pressure is gone. That's exactly what happened to a Jeep owner I worked with. The oil pump actually failed. Pressure dropped to 0, but the sensor stayed pegged at normal. He kept driving for weeks thinking everything was fine, until the engine seized solid. By then, it was beyond saving. That's why you never trust a sketchy reading. If your oil light flickers, if you hear ticking or knocking, shut the engine down immediately and verify with a mechanical oil pressure gauge. You can pick one up for $20 and it tells the truth every time. And here's a detail most drivers miss. On some engines, especially GM, the oil pressure sensor has a tiny filter screen underneath it. That screen clogs with sludge, making the sensor read wrong even if the sensor itself is fine. If you're replacing the sensor, always check or replace that screen too. Bottom line, this little switch is one of the smallest and cheapest parts on your engine, but it carries the biggest responsibility: protecting your motor from running dry. Don't gamble on it. If your readings don't add up, don't assume. Verify it. Because trusting a lying sensor can cost you the entire engine. If there's one sensor your engine can't live without, it's the crankshaft position sensor. This little piece of electronics is the brain's eyes and ears. It tells the ECU exactly where the crankshaft is and how fast it's spinning. That information is what controls spark timing, fuel injection, and ultimately whether your engine runs at all. But here's the scary part. When this sensor fails, your engine doesn't just run poorly, it can shut off completely without warning, even at highway speeds. I've seen cars towed in where everything looked fine. The battery was good, the starter was strong, fuel was flowing, but the engine simply refused to fire. Why? Because without a signal from the crank sensor, the ECU is blind. No signal means no spark, no fuel injection, no combustion, just silence. And it doesn't always fail cleanly. Sometimes it works fine cold, but once the engine heats up, the sensor glitches out. I had an older Nissan come into the shop that would randomly stall, sometimes at a red light, sometimes cruising at 60 on the freeway. The owner had replaced the alternator, battery, and even the fuel pump. None of it fixed the problem. The real culprit? A bad crankshaft sensor buried near the bell housing. A $30 part that left him stranded over and over again. The symptoms can drive you crazy. Random stalling, no start conditions after the car warms up, or an engine that cranks endlessly but never fires. If you scan the system and see no RPM signal while cranking, that's your clue. The sensor isn't talking. And here's the kicker. Cheap aftermarket sensors often fail sooner than OEM ones. They don't handle heat well, and since the sensor sits near some of the hottest parts of the engine, quality matters. Always stick to trusted brands when replacing it. Think of it this way. Your engine could have perfect fuel, perfect spark plugs, perfect compression, but without this one sensor telling the computer when to fire, everything shuts down. It's one of the smallest parts in your engine, yet it has the power to stop you dead in your tracks. Ignore it, and you're gambling with a breakdown that can happen anywhere, anytime. Your engine doesn't have instincts. It relies on sensors to tell it what's happening. and one of the most critical sensors in the system is the coolant temperature sensor. Most drivers never even think about it, but this little probe controls far more than just your dash gauge. It tells your ECU how hot the engine is, and that single piece of data influences almost everything: your fuel mixture, ignition timing, fan operation, cold starts, and even overheat protection. When the sensor is accurate, your engine runs smooth and efficient. But when it goes bad, the computer is running blind, and your engine pays the price. I've seen cars run rich, burning extra fuel, and fouling spark plugs, all because the sensor falsely told the ECU the engine was still ice cold. I've seen cooling fans fail to turn on, leading to overheating, warped heads, and cracked gaskets. Again, all because the ECU never got the right signal. One Toyota I worked on wouldn't start properly every morning. It cranked fine, but it just wouldn't catch. Why? The coolant temp sensor was stuck reading 40 degrees Fahrenheit all the time. The ECU thought it was in the middle of an Alaskan winter and kept dumping fuel like crazy. Every morning, the engine would flood itself before it could fire. One tiny sensor turned a perfectly good car into a daily headache. The symptoms aren't always obvious, and you might not even get a check engine light right away. Instead, you'll notice things like your temp gauge acting weird, the cooling fans never kicking on, poor MPG for no clear reason, or hard.